of financial education,
Yeah,
it can have some really long-term consequences.
right.
People enter adulthood and they just don't have the knowledge
Mm-hmm.
or the tools to make smart choices
Right.
about their finances.
But where's the personal responsibility in all this? Like,
Yeah.
shouldn't individuals take it upon themselves
Oh, sure.
to learn about finances?
Personal responsibility is super important.
Yeah.
But, these systemic issues,
Yeah.
like the lack of financial literacy being baked into our education system, it can perpetuate these cycles of struggle, especially for people who are already coming from disadvantaged backgrounds.
Right.
It's like starting a race with a handicap,
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know that old advice everyone gets about money? Go to school, get a job, save, invest.
Yeah,
Have you ever felt like it just doesn't cut it anymore?
right.
Well, this deep dive, this one might just shake things up a bit. We're diving into the mind of someone who says flat out, those old rules, they're obsolete.
Totally. And what's really fascinating is their reasoning behind it. They argue that the whole game, like the whole financial game, changed way back in 1971.
Oh, okay, 1971, what happened then?
That's when the gold standard ended. See, before that, money was actually tied to something physical, a commodity, gold.
Okay.
But after 71, money essentially became debt.
So instead of holding, like, actual money,
Yeah.
we're holding
It's more like a promise.
a promise, like an IOU.
Exactly, a promise to pay, but it's not backed by anything solid. It's backed by more promises. Kind of a house of cards, if you think about it.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to see where this is going. So money equals debt.
Right?
And if that's true then, does that mean all those old rules about saving and investing, are they like expired milk?
That is a great analogy. Our source actually uses a really similar one. They say that clinging to those old, outdated ideas about money, it's like ignoring the expiration date on something important.
Right.
Like, you wouldn't drink sour milk, would ya?
No.
Exactly. So why cling to financial advice that's past its sell-by date? You got to adapt.
Well, I get it. So the system's changed. The rules have changed. So what does this new playbook, what's it look like? Because they're not just, criticizing the old ways. They're offering some pretty radical alternatives.
Exactly. And one of the most surprising is what they say about debt.
Oh, here we go.
Ready for this? Instead of telling us to get out of debt, they actually encourage us to understand how to use it strategically.
Really?
Yeah.
That goes against pretty much everything we've ever been taught, right?
It really does. Our source claims that most people were so afraid of debt that we completely miss out on opportunities to actually use it to our advantage.
Like how? Can you give me an example?
They actually give a really good example. They talk about how they refinanced something like $300 million in debt.
$300 million in debt.
$300 million, that's what they say. And they refinanced it at a lower interest rate. And that move actually ended up making them a ton of money.
Wow, $300 million.
Yeah.
I can't even wrap my head around that number. But okay, I think I see the point. So if you can borrow money, let's say at 3%, but then invest it in something that makes 7%, you actually come out ahead.
Exactly. It's about seeing debt as a tool, not just a big, scary monster. You have to know how to use it.
Okay, so debt, got it. That's interesting. So what about taxes? A lot of the traditional financial advice is all about minimizing taxes, but our source seems to have like a totally different view on that.
Yeah, they're pretty outspoken about the current tax system, actually. They say that the system is rigged to benefit the wealthy, and it actually disadvantages the poor and the middle class.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that argument before.
But they don't just complain about it. Our source claims to pay zero tax on their income.
Zero? How is that even possible?
They use this really interesting strategy. They call it the 4-to-1 step up. It involves investing in real estate strategically, and then they use the equity they build in that real estate to actually secure loans from the bank.
Okay.
So they're kind of turning the tables, using the tax code itself to minimize their tax liability.
So they're using the system to kind of game the system.
You could say that.
That's pretty bold.
Yep.
But before we get too deep into that, can you give me an example of how this idea of the tax system favoring the wealthy? Can you give me a real world example?
Yeah, actually, they tell a story about a friend of theirs, a doctor. This doctor earned $1 million in 1 year.
Wow.
Right. $1 million income. But get this, they ended up paying $750,000 of that in taxes.
Ouch, that's a huge chunk.
Right. And meanwhile, our source, they claim they make a similar income. But because of how they've structured their investments, how they work within the tax code, they pay nothing in taxes.
That's a crazy difference. Like, even though they're both making the same amount, the doctor's losing, what, like 3/4 of their income to taxes.
It's a big difference for sure.
Wow.
And that's what our source is getting at. They're saying that understanding the tax system, it's not just about minimizing what you owe, it's about using it as a tool to actually build wealth.
Okay, so we've got challenging conventional wisdom. We've got embracing debt strategically. We've got this deep understanding of the tax system. It's like a whole new approach.
Right.
But how do you go from being stuck in the old system to actually creating this new financial reality?
Well, that's where this idea of an entrepreneurial mindset comes in. And I think to really understand that, we need to dig a little deeper into their personal story.
Okay, I'm all for it. Let's keep diving. Okay, so this entrepreneurial mindset, let's unpack that a little. It seems like our source sees it as like the key to unlocking this whole new way of thinking about wealth.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's not just about starting any business. It's really a shift in perspective, a different way of looking at the world. Like, take economic downturns, for example. Most people, they get terrified, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But a real entrepreneur, they see those downturns as opportunities.
So while everyone else is running away,
Yeah.
they're running toward the problem. That takes a lot of guts.
It does, and it goes back to that idea, you know, focusing on what you can control, your internal economy, rather than letting the external economy just kind of toss you around.
This internal economy idea, I'm really interested in that. Can you break that down even more? What does that actually mean?
Okay, so imagine this. It's your own personal ecosystem. Your skills, your resources, how you create value.
Okay.
That's your internal economy. It's about building something sustainable.
Okay, so no matter what happens in the outside world,
Exactly.
like someone with a strong internal economy, they wouldn't be devastated by, say, a job loss or a market crash.
Right. They'd have other income streams, other resources to fall back on. It's not putting all your eggs in one basket.
So that they're not relying on a single employer or like a volatile stock market for all their financial well-being.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm starting to see how this like really ties into the entrepreneurial mindset. It's about taking ownership of your own financial future, not relying on somebody else to provide for you.
Yes. And our source's journey is a great example of this. Remember they talked about leaving their secure job at Xerox?
Yeah. That story about the last paycheck, the $30,000 bonus check.
Yeah.
I remember that. It seemed like such a turning point.
It was. They said they felt a mix of excitement and fear. I mean, you know, they were stepping into the unknown.
Right.
But they were so motivated to build something of their own.
It's interesting because they said that their colleagues at Xerox, they all thought like, oh, they're going to fail. They'll be crawling back for their old job sooner.
Right.
But it sounds like our source had like a totally different vision.
Yeah.
They had a belief in themselves that other people just couldn't see yet.
Exactly. They saw that 30,000 not as like an ending, but as a beginning.
Seed money.
Yeah.
So this entrepreneurial mindset, it's not just about starting businesses, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really more like an attitude, a different way of approaching challenges and opportunities.
You got it. And our source, they have this great analogy. They compare the mind of an entrepreneur to someone who falls down, and instead of just staying down, they see it as a chance to like rise even higher.
Whereas someone with a more traditional mindset might just see that fall as like a defeat.
Exactly. A setback. It's about resilience, you know? Seeing setbacks as learning experiences and having the tenacity to just keep going even when things get tough.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What about the more practical side? Say someone's listening to this thinking, all right, entrepreneurial mindset. Sounds great, but I don't even know where to begin.
Well, our source is a big believer in just taking action, even small steps at first. It could be starting a little side hustle, investing in a rental property, maybe even just learning a new skill that you could, you know, turn into income later.
So it's not about quitting your job tomorrow, going all in on some crazy venture. It's more about taking those initial steps to build up your internal economy little by little.
Exactly. Focus on what you're good at, what you're passionate about, because our source argues that so many people are stuck in these jobs they hate simply because they haven't taken the time to really figure out what their true strengths and passions are.
Yeah, I think that's true. We've been conditioned to think that we have to follow a certain path, go to school, get a good job, climb that corporate ladder. But maybe that's not the only way.
And that's exactly what our source is challenging, right? They're saying, hey, there's another way. Create your own path, build your own success. And it all starts with that internal shift, that entrepreneurial mindset.
So they're not just advocating for entrepreneurship as a career path, but as a way of life almost, a way of thinking.
It is. It's about being proactive, not reactive, taking control, not letting circumstances dictate your future.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's be honest, I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who are thinking, okay, sure, that's easy for you to say you're already successful. What about those of us who are just struggling to make ends meet, who feel like they're trapped in the system?
It's a valid point, and our source does acknowledge that not everyone starts from the same place. But they argue that even if you're starting with very limited resources, those principles of building an internal economy, they still apply.
So it's about finding those small wins,
Yeah.
even if you can't launch some huge million-dollar business right away.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to constant learning and growth. Our source really stresses the importance of staying ahead of the curve, seeking new information, adapting to how the world's changing.
It's like that analogy they used about the milk. Don't just check the expiration date on the carton. Check the expiration date on your own knowledge, too.
Right, because in today's world, what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. You got to constantly evolve, upgrade your skills, expand your understanding.
Okay, so we've got this entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
Taking ownership, embracing the challenges, focusing on what you can control. But I'm curious to hear more about the specifics of this new playbook they keep talking about. How do they actually put these ideas into practice?
Well, that's where their strategies on debt and taxes come into play.
All right, let's dive into that. Okay, so debt and taxes, these unconventional strategies, let's dig into those because they seem like a pretty core part of this new playbook our source talks about.
Oh, absolutely. They're essential. And it's funny because they go completely against traditional financial advice. Like, remember how our source actually tells us to use debt? Strategically, of course.
Yeah, most people are taught that debt is like the enemy,
Yeah.
something to avoid, like the plague. But our source is saying, no, debt can be a tool. It can actually help build wealth.
Exactly. But the key is you have to know what kind of debt you're dealing with. They talk a lot about what they call good debt.
Good debt.
Yeah. So that's debt that you use to invest in things that are going to increase in value. So, like real estate or maybe even a business.
So it's not about being totally debt-free. It's about being strategic, making sure that the debt you have is actually working for you.
Right. And they even say that sometimes taking on more debt can actually be a good thing. Like, they give this example of refinancing. So if you can refinance a loan, get a lower interest rate, well, now you've freed up some cash flow that you can use to, reinvest in other things, other opportunities that'll help you build more wealth.
So it sounds like with debt, they're saying, don't be scared of it. Just be smart about it. Learn the rules of the game, use it to your advantage. Don't let it control you.
Exactly. And that same idea, it applies to their approach to taxes, too.
Yeah, taxes. Another one of those things where the traditional advice is all about minimizing how much you pay. Right.
Yeah, but our source, they see it differently. They say most people get so caught up in, just trying to pay less that they miss out on the bigger picture. They miss out on opportunities to actually use the tax code to build wealth.
So they're not just talking about like using deductions and credits to pay less. They're talking about like the whole system itself as something that can help you get ahead.
Right. They believe that the truly wealthy, they get it. They know how to structure their investments, how to manage their income so that, yeah, they minimize their taxes, but they also maximize the returns they're getting. It's all part of the plan.
Speaking of plans, let's talk about that 4-to-1 step-up strategy
Yeah.
that they mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
Can you walk me through how that actually works? Because I'm still a little fuzzy on the details.
Okay, so basically the idea is this. You invest $1 million in real estate,
Okay.
and then as that property goes up in value, you use the equity you've built to take out loans from the bank, like a lot of loans. They're talking about $4 million in loans.
$4 million. From an initial investment of $1 million. That's a pretty big jump. But how does that help with taxes?
Well, a lot of times the interest that you pay on those loans, that's actually tax deductible. Yeah. And they can also depreciate the value of the property, over time. And that also reduces how much income they have to pay taxes on. It can get pretty complicated, to be honest, but the main idea is that they're using the tax code to their advantage. They're not letting it drain their wealth away.
So it's like they're playing a whole different game than most people. While everyone else is just trying to stay within the lines, trying to minimize their taxes, they're using their deeper understanding of the system to create wealth more effectively.
Yeah, it's like they're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
That's a great way to put it.
Don't be afraid to question those old rules, Those things everyone just assumes are true. The way everyone else does things. It might not be the best way. And it might not be the right way for you.
It's about thinking for yourself, figuring out what works for your own unique situation, even if it's a little unconventional.
Exactly. And that might mean, stepping outside your comfort zone, taking some risks, being willing to learn new things. But as we've seen with our source, those risks can really pay off.
And I think another big takeaway is that idea of the entrepreneurial mindset. And remember, that doesn't necessarily mean starting a business, right? It's more about being proactive, taking control of your financial future, and always being on the lookout for opportunities to create something new, something valuable.
Absolutely. It's about looking at the world not as like a limited pie that everyone's fighting over, but as a place where opportunity is everywhere. And you just have to have the courage to go after it.
That's a great point. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Think differently. And most importantly, never stop learning. Never stop adapting. Because the world is changing all the time.
Well said. What else is kind of jumping out at you from these excerpts?
Well, he uses monopoly a lot.
Oh, really?
As this metaphor for real estate investing. Yeah. He sees it as this simplified way to kind of illustrate key concepts.
Okay.
Like acquiring assets, generating cash flow, and understanding leverage.
It's funny that he uses monopoly. I mean, most people associate that with, childhood.
Yeah, I know.
And fun
Right.
to explain something as serious as real estate investing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's actually a really clever way to make, these complex financial concepts,
Right.
accessible.
Right.
Think about it. In Monopoly, what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
Buy properties, right?
Yeah.
Develop them, and then you collect that rent
Right.
from other players.
Right. Yeah. So he's drawing this parallel between owning those little greenhouses and red hotels or whatever to owning real world properties that generate income.
Exactly.
I get it.
Yeah.
And then there's that concept of leverage too.
Yeah.
Which, you can see in the game.
You can mortgage properties, right?
Right.
To raise cash for more investments.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of like using, borrowed money to buy real estate.
Yeah. But leveraging in real estate can be pretty risky, right?
Oh, for sure.
I mean, if property values go down, you could end up owing more than the property's worth.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why his analogy, while helpful, shouldn't be taken too literally.
Right. Right.
Real estate's a lot more complicated than a board game.
Right.
You got to really understand the market trends, financing options, and all the legal stuff, too.
Which kind of brings us back to his whole thing about learning from real teachers, people who are, actually engaged in the field that you want to pursue. It seems like he learned as much, maybe even more from Rich Dad, with all his practical experience, than from any sort of formal education.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's saying that formal education might be necessary.
Yeah.
But it's not really enough
right.
when it comes to,
when it comes to success,
financial success,
You need that real-world, hands-on experience.
Yeah.
And ideally, guidance from someone who's been there, done that.
Right. Someone who's actually, played the game that you want to learn, whether it's real estate or entrepreneurship or whatever it is.
Yeah. He's a huge advocate for mentorship.
Yeah.
Finding someone who's actively, in the arena.
Right.
Doing the thing.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't want to learn surgery from a textbook.
Right.
You'd want to be in the operating room with, an experienced surgeon.
Oh, yeah.
Watching them, do their thing.
Observing, learning from their years of practice.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about getting that practical wisdom.
Right.
That gut feeling that comes from experience.
Yeah, that you can't really get from a textbook or a classroom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it helps to have someone who can guide you through the inevitable, challenges and setbacks you're going to face.
Right, because everybody faces those.
Oh, yeah. Someone who's, been through the fire themselves and come out stronger on the other side.
Right. It's interesting in how he ties, financial success to this broader perspective that he calls, spiritual. Yeah. What's he even mean by that?
Yeah, it's not really about religion.
Okay.
It's more like a mindset.
Okay.
A way of approaching all the ups and downs of life with resilience and a willingness to learn from every experience, even the bad ones.
Right. Even the ones that people would consider failures.
Right. Exactly.
It reminds me of that quote, I think it was Edison, who said, I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
Exactly.
It's about seeing those setbacks as opportunities to grow and learn rather than
reasons to give up.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Kiyosaki argues that a lot of people are just so afraid of making mistakes, of losing money,
Yeah.
looking foolish,
Yeah.
you know,
Totally.
that they just end up paralyzed.
Yeah.
They don't do anything.
Stuck in their comfort zone.
Right.
Yeah.
So they'd rather play it safe
Yeah.
than take a risk, even if it means potentially missing out on.
Huge rewards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that fear can be a major roadblock
Oh, absolutely.
to any kind of financial success.
Big time.
It's that poor dad mindset
Right.
we were talking about, you know?
Yeah.
It's focusing on what you might lose instead of
Exactly.
what you could gain.
Yeah, yeah.
So he's really advocating for a more, I guess,
Entrepreneurial approach.
even for people who aren't necessarily starting businesses.
Right.
It's about being proactive, taking risks, and
Calculated risks.
right, and always like learning,
Learning,
Adapting.
Yeah. He believes that mindset is crucial no matter what path you've chosen.
Okay.
Whether you're, climbing the corporate ladder,
Mm,
building a freelance career,
right.
investing in the stock market, you need that willingness to step outside your comfort zone
All right.
and embrace those challenges as like opportunities to grow.
It's developing that rich dad mindset.
Yeah.
Right, where you believe you can actually create your own opportunities and achieve your goals.
Yeah.
Even if the path isn't clear or predictable.
Right. And that ties directly into his final point, finding your game.
Right.
He found his in real estate.
Yeah.
But he really emphasizes that everyone needs to figure out what works for them.
What aligns with their strengths and passions.
Right, their risk tolerance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not about just blindly following someone else's formula
Right.
for success.
It's about self-awareness,
yeah.
understanding your own talents,
Yeah.
interests, and figuring out how those can translate into financial opportunities.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot where your passion and your financial goals intersect.
Yeah.
Because when you're actually excited about what you're doing,
Right.
you're more likely to put in the work,
Yeah.
persevere through challenges, and ultimately achieve success.
Right.
Yeah.
And that game can take so many forms, right?
Yeah.
It could be starting a traditional business,
Yeah.
building an online brand, investing in real estate,
Yeah.
even just becoming a really sought-after consultant in your field.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the specific activity, right?
Right.
It's the mindset that you're bringing to it.
Yeah.
That entrepreneurial spirit,
Yeah.
that drive to create value and build something,
Right.
Meaningful.
So how does, all this resonate with you so far?
Yeah.
Do any of his ideas,
A lot of it does,
yeah.
but I think his emphasis on shifting from that scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset
Mm-hmm.
is super powerful.
Okay.
It's about challenging those beliefs
You're right.
that hold us back. you know?
Right. That we're limited.
Yeah, and realizing that we obviously have way more control
Yeah.
over our finances than we often think.
It's about taking ownership
Yeah.
and responsibility rather than just feeling
A victim
Yeah.
of circumstance.
yeah. I like that.
I think his focus on, finding your game,
yeah.
aligning your pursuits
Right.
with your passions and strengths, that resonates a lot with me.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that financial success shouldn't come at the expense of personal fulfillment.
So it's not just about accumulating wealth
Right.
for the sake of it. Yeah.
It's about building a life
Yeah.
that's both financially secure and personally satisfying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a message I think a lot of people can get behind.
Yeah, I think so too.
Totally.
It seems like a lot of his philosophy
Yeah.
boils down to just taking control, right?
Yeah.
Not waiting for things to come to you, but
Yeah.
actually seeking out opportunities,
Yeah.
creating them,
Mm-hmm.
shaping your own.
Destiny.
Yeah.
He's definitely challenging
Yeah.
that passive approach
Yeah.
that a lot of people
Well,
take.
their money.
Yeah. It's they're just hoping to trip over a pot of gold instead of creating.
Right, forging their own path.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just about quitting your job,
Right.
starting a business.
Yeah.
He encourages that mindset, even if you're,
Yeah.
in a more
You
traditional.
have to quit your day job to
Yeah.
embrace these principles.
So it's about being proactive,
Even in your current role.
taking on new challenges
Yeah. Seeking out ways
Yeah.
to add value.
to contribute.
Always learning, developing your skills.
Yeah, exactly.
So even if you work for someone else,
Yeah.
you can still kind of approach it with that.
That rich dad mentality.
Yeah.
Always be thinking, how can I improve? How can I contribute more?
Right. How can I make myself indispensable?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that might involve
Yeah.
taking on more responsibility,
Mhm.
seeking out a mentor, like within your company.
Yeah.
Maybe developing a side hustle
That aligns with your
that you're passionate about.
the passions and skills.
Yeah.
Yeah, creating multiple streams of income,
Right.
diversifying your options.
Not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, which, going back to the Monopoly metaphor,
Right.
it's a smart strategy
Yeah.
in any game.
Yeah. You don't want to just rely on landing on Boardwalk to
Right.
win.
You got to build up a portfolio.
You got to have those other properties
Yeah.
generating that cash flow and being prepared for like the unexpected.
Right, exactly.
And that's where his whole emphasis on financial literacy like comes back around.
Yeah, full circle.
You need to have that knowledge
Yeah.
to make those informed decisions, whether it's
Business.
real estate or stocks or
Yeah.
your own business.
You need that foundation.
Yeah. So it's not just about the mindset.
Right.
It's also about having the tool.
The tools and knowledge
Yeah.
to execute.
Put your plan into action.
Yeah.
You need both.
You
right?
need the vision and the practical skills
Yeah.
to make it happen.
And that's why finding like the right mentors, the right teachers is so important. They
Yeah.
can provide that guidance, share their experience.
Help you avoid those costly mistakes.
He's basically saying, don't reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Find those people who have already,
Who've done it.
Yeah, achieved what you want.
Yeah.
And learn from them.
It's like having a roadmap
Yeah.
instead of just wandering around.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive
Yeah.
into Robert Kiyosaki
Yeah.
and all his ideas, what like resonates the most with you?
Yeah.
What are you going to take away from all this?
I think the biggest thing for me is like that mindset shift,
Okay.
from scarcity to abundance,
Right.
from passivity to proactivity.
Yeah.
It's like realizing we have way more control over our financial destinies than we think.
Then we often give ourselves credit for.
Yeah.
And even if we're not all like destined to be,
Right.
real estate tycoons,
Yeah.
we can all cultivate that entrepreneurial spirit,
Totally.
that drive to create value and build something meaningful,
Absolutely.
whether it's in our careers or investments or even like our personal lives.
And I think that's ultimately what he's like challenging us to do.
Yeah.
To find our own game.
Right.
To find success on our own terms.
Yeah.
And take ownership.
Of our future.
Yeah.
So we'll leave you with this. What's your game?
Yeah. Good question.
What steps can you take like today
Yeah.
to start playing it?
To embrace those rich dad principles.
Yeah, to create a life of financial freedom and fulfillment.
The game is on.
The game is on and the possibilities are
Endless.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.